Yes, so that's interesting. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, and so once, yes, let me introduce my manual laser pointer. Okay, so this, you know, as I say, I'm not good at, let's say, in 1 month's time, you will not remember what I said, you will remember my manual laser pointer, and in 2 years, everybody will have gotten me, but they will remember that there was some guy speaking very fast with the manual laser pointer. Okay, we're all good. Okay, so I'm going to speak about several things. Yes, energy transition, membership, and also some work on generative AI. So this is something really cool that students like, but I guess that is also of interest for our members. So next, let's go next. Okay, so by the way, is it possible to get rid of, because there are actually some information that is going to be yes, so yes, it has to kind of minimize. No, so okay, sorry for that. It's worse. Yes, because the problem is the resolution of the because it doesn't cooperate. So we learn by so. Yes, okay. You have now there's a way. I mean, just to share, and you can share. Yeah. And then, yes, exactly. All right. So we are good. And then this should be able to retract. Yeah. Yes. High meeting. Yes. High meeting. Yes. All right, we stay where we are. Okay, so I will just tell you, I mean, if I remember what is below. Okay, so as an introduction, I have to confess that I decided to join this industry. This 1968 John Wayne movie, where the main character was inspired by Red Alert, which was the flying fireman, the guy that was putting off the flames whenever there was a blowout. And I thought it was so cool. I said, this is the industry I want to be in. And so I decided to learn petroleum engineering, and so I went to Stanford University. For that, I had the scholarship from Schlumberger. Well, actually, it was so petroleum at the time. And you know, and when I started studying, I had 2 big disappointments. One is that oil and gas was not stored in caves, that you just had to dig and take the oil and gas. That there was this thing called dark flow. So for those who are reservoir, that was making things much too complicated. And the second is that the normal procedure was not to drill, reach the oil, blow out, call red alert, turn it off, and then put in production, which was, to me, the normal thing to do. So it was a big disappointment, but it was too late. I couldn't change my major. And so my personal history was set. So that was my expectation when I joined the oil and gas. Next. The reality was a bit different, but actually it was better. So just as an illustration, this is actually say a trip that I did like 3 weeks ago, and I visited, because I was born in Africa, so I am technically a West African, even though I don't look like it. And so the regional director from Africa said, you were born in Africa, so you are going to visit all the French-speaking African countries. So I did that, and actually I have to say that it was great. And also, and there is a connection to what I'm going to speak about, is that when when you visit Africa, you say, okay, this is a continent that needs growth, that needs to develop. In other words, all the things we speak about energy transition, etc., that should be second on the agenda. The problem right now is that many places it is to go out of poverty, and so these countries are not going to pay the climate debt that they did not contract. So I was thinking that energy transition would be so, okay, well, this European that is speaking about energy transition. And in fact, when I was dealing with these young professionals and these students, they had exactly the same questions and the same doubts on our industry. In other words, the issue of energy transition is not only a European thing, this is something that is everywhere, except even though they say the reality is different. So next. So Essentially, yes, so that's going to be complicated. So this introduction to say that joining the industry in 1983, when I joined, was a relatively easy decision. You could hate it or you could love it, but essentially there was no issue about climate change. There was some uncertainty on peak oil already, but peak oil was something that was moved 10 years every 10 years, so it was okay. So essentially, you had only positive results. You have the technical challenge, it was complicated. Personal challenge, you would operate sometimes in challenging conditions. You have the travel, you have the good pay, you have the joint weight impression, so everything was positive. Now, fast forward 40 years, next. Joining the industry today, so for a student to decide to join our industry or for a young professional to decide to stay in our industry is a qualified decision. In other words, you need to be an adult to take the decision, and not a kid like I was in 1983. And essentially, each of these young professional or student has to answer two questions. One that is selfish, which is there a career for me? Because you tell me, for example, sometimes the SPE president, I've read that we have at least 20 years of oil and gas. Yes, but I'm 25. 25 plus 20 or 45. Will I be obsolete at 45? Not like that. So that's a selfish question. And then there is an altruistic question, which is, am I on the right side of the story? Okay, all these things, all the bad things that I see about the oil and gas industry, is it true? And am I a bad person if I join the industry? And again, as I say, I was thinking that it was a European concern. Even kids everywhere, they are asking the same question. Because they have option. They are engineers, they can go somewhere else. So these are two valid questions. And of course, if I'm here, because my answer is yes and yes, so I will be in trouble, right? But the fact is that this is a question that each of them has to answer. It's not anybody that answers on their behalf. And you can imagine that some of them is related to the energy transition, or more exactly, the understanding of what our industry has or doesn't have in the context of energy transition. Next. So, thinking about energy transition, next. So, several things. First of all, this is something that you may have seen hundreds of times. This is a scenario of the International Energy Agency, IEA, which is showing essentially the evolution of the CO2 emission of the planet, of the mankind, depending on a few scenarios. So the main scenarios are the step scenario corresponding to the commitment of the Paris Agreement. Then you have the APA scenario, which corresponds to, if you take each politician and believe what they say, then that's what would happen. And the net zero scenario is a sort of technical constraint, which is to say, we don't know how, but we will be net zero in 2050. And of course, you can imagine that when the choice of the scenario, I mean, the scenario that we will be effectively following, will have a huge impact on the license that our industry has on looking for oil and gas. But anyway, one thing that I noticed when the first time I started to travel as a SPE president was that whenever I would start, the perception of energy transition would be very different. So if I would go to Western Europe, so my first talk was actually in Amsterdam, and I remember this young professional that came to me and said, could you please remove the P from SPE because it's killing us? Okay, so the term petroleum is basically something that is banned in Europe. Then, and actually that was in this order. A few weeks later, I went to the Caspian. I don't remember if it was Azerbaijan or Kazakhstan. And at this time, I was meeting it was Kazakhstan, it was KNG, the national oil company, gas company. And then I told them, they told me, okay, yes, net zero, 2060, 2070, we don't know. But right now, our problem is we want to invest massively to keep our production at plateau in the next 20 to 30 years. This is what matters to us. And then I went to Argentina. And Argentina is a funny place because this was a traditional oil and gas, small producer. The plateau, the peak had been in 2005 or 2006. And it was going down, dying slowly, like the rest of the onshore conventional. And then they had Vaca Muerta and this big unconventional formation. And the outcome is that, so YPF has the national oil company has kind of divested all the major fields and is focusing on Vaca Muerta. And the goal is that next year they will pass the record production they had in 2005, and it will still go on. And it is to the point where it will invert the sense of pipeline. So like Argentina was always a gas importer. They were getting gas from Bolivia. They had a pipeline. They are now inverting the direction of the pipeline because the traditional gas is dying in Bolivia. So now they are becoming exporters, and then they are making energy stations, etc., to export the gas everywhere. So in other words, for Argentina, energy transition, what's that? And then you have the UAE. So UAE, so United Arab Emirates, it's an interesting one because it was, they invest massively in energy transition. You will see some islands with farms of solar farms that go all over the country, like as the horizon. They are investing billions and billions in CO2, in geothermal, everything they can find, they invest. But at the same time, they tell us we will be the one producing the last barrel of oil on Earth. So in other words, for them, energy transition, extremely important, paid by the oil industry. Okay, so now for SPE, and that's one thing that I was saying before the presentation. I'm going to be longer. I'm taking my time, and okay. But anyway, energy transition. So SPE is a 501c3 not-for-profit technical society based in the US, and one of the outcomes is that we are not expected, we are not even allowed to lobby. In other words, we are not the ones to say we should have more oil or we should have less oil, probably not. This is not our. So, in other words, if our societies tell us close shop for the greater good, SPE, okay, so be it, we close shop. Okay, that's not our goal. However, as the SPE president, I have the duty to have a cold look, actually, president or board member or each of us, actually, we have the duty to have a cold look at what is happening, what is likely to happen, so what I call a P50, okay, for those who are familiar with the sales, so that we can tell our young professionals and students what is expected, what we are expecting, without blind music. So it's important to have this cold look. Next.
Let me ask you, is it okay if we ask questions like in the middle, or we keep the questions right to...
Probably, they say, probably we go to the end of the energy transition and then you can stop it, okay, if you don't mind. Yeah, I saw that where the active, I would prefer because I may be answering some of your questions in the coming part. Next. Oh, one thing, you may think that the term energy transition is a creation from an NGO or from the UNO or something. No, the term energy transition was created in the 1950s by the nuclear energy industry in the context of a lobbying, they were lobbying the US government to convince the US government to heavily subsidize their next generation of nuclear power plants. And to do that, they had actually taken the work of King Hubbert, who was a geologist from Shell, who had indeed had this analysis of peak oil. And you see, King Hubbert was a very smart guy, still had anticipated that the peak oil for the US would be in December 1968. That didn't work, but in any case, there was this theory. And so what the nuclear industry was saying is, okay, you have the peak, and you will be able to have a transition between the petroleum and the nuclear power. And then essentially they could even show this scale of thousands of years, showing that actually fossil fuel will be a sort of necessary blip in the history of mankind before actually nuclear power would take over for the 1,000 years to come. So that was a theory. So again, that was not an NGO thing. And 20 years later, the term energy transition was taken in the context of climate change. Next. So if you take now the IPCC tells us, and this is the only statement that I really disagree, and what they say is, the energy transition that we are doing now, we did it in the past. We did it in the past when we moved from wood to coal, or when we moved from coal to oil and gas. The only difference is that this energy transition, because of the climate emergency, we do it faster. And as an illustration, they show these numbers this graph that are exact. Okay, the numbers are exact, where they show the percentage of the cocktail of energy from in the transition from wood to coal over 140 years, or from coal to oil and gas over 50 years. And this is right, but it can be very misleading because it is in percentage. It doesn't take into account the growth of energy needs that have occurred over this period. If you get into average to absolute terms, not next, then the story is very different. Because what you see is that indeed, if you take biofuels, if you take coal, if you take oil and gas, everything has gone up in the past 150, 200 years. In fact, the peak of coal, okay, with the transition of coal, didn't start it was not in 1920. The peak of coal was 2024, 2025 exactly. Okay, so and it's the same thing. And in fact, this also applies to even to animal muscular energy. Always up. Human muscular energy, of course, because of our population, always up. The only source of energy, the important source of energy that has gone down in the history of mankind, whale oil. Whale oil, in fact, went down in the 1920s, replaced by oil and gas, which is great. We have stopped killing whales. But apart from whale oil, everything has gone down, which means that the energy transitions of the past have always been by aggregation of the new energy to the old energy and not replacement. So again, we are not repeating it here. We are not saying this should not happen. But when the IPCC says what we did in the past, we are going to do it faster, no. If we replace oil and gas, that will be the first time ever that we are reducing a source of energy. And maybe, and we probably have to do it, but saying that we did it in the past, no, it never ever happened. Next. So illustration also of the fact that also historically, the old energy has always been used for the new energy. Before actually, the new energy would be used to improve the conditions of production of the old energy. Example, this is the main Ford T factory in the US, you know, the one that was making the first series of car. And you see that half of the area is the factory itself, half of the area is minerals, and you can see that coal is a large part of it. In the 1930s, you needed 7 tons of coal to produce 140. Today, you need 2 tons of coal to produce electric car in China. Okay. So, and these 7 tons are more than the total gas that the 40 would produce, would consume in its life expectancy. Second example, next. Wood. In 1930, okay, the UK, who had moved away from wood to coal and went to massively to coal, had multiplied by 6 its use of wood between 1830, where they were using the wood for the energy, to 1930, because they were using mass amount of wood for the structure of their mine and other things, of course. In other words, the usage of wood, so it was not, I'm cheating a bit here because that was not, they were not burning the wood, but still the use of wood was greater. Next, and now this gets us to today. You see, if you look at electrification, you need for electrification, you need copper, I mean, for cars, for example, you need copper, you need lithium for batteries. Copper, to produce 1 ton of copper, you need 90 tons of water. To produce 1 ton of lithium, you need 2,000 tons of water. Now, where does the copper and the lithium comes from? Well, a lot of it comes from Chile. And where? In the deserts. So some of them are getting water from the Andes, actually. But for most of them, how do you do that? You go to the ocean, you make a desalination plant, you take 200 kilometers of pipeline, you push the desalinized water 2,000 meters to 4,000 meters up, and then you use the water to, let's say, to extract copper and lithium. So essentially, coal, oil, gas, energy, etc. Whatever you have available, whatever the cocktail is. Next. So to go back now to our different scenarios, so you have this same scenario, steps, APS and net zero, but now shown in terms not on CO2, but oil and gas. I didn't show coal. Coal, by the way, is the one that is for sure going down, which would be in any case the first time that we go down on energy. But for oil and gas, you see that the step scenario is the one that is kind of planning a stabilized production in the foreseeable future. And really, if you look at the history of energy transition that I've been speaking about, if you look at the current trend and the fact also that emerging countries are absolutely not ready, again, to give up on wealth. And this is something, I went in Gabon, I visited the Ministry of Energy in Gabon, and they were almost shouting at me. I did say, not saying anything, but say, we are not going, we need the oil and gas period. It's like, they were defensive before I had said anything. Well, I agree, but okay, that's, so you see, so if you look at all of that, with the P50, let's say the scenario that we seem to be following is a step scenario. What is interesting is that if you look at the details of the step scenario, you see actually where we have this sort of dissonance between what you hear in Europe and what you hear in other places. Is that if we look at oil and gas, we will see that logically, developed countries, China is a bit of different fish, but developed countries will reduce logically their usage of oil and gas, but this will be compensated by an increase from emerging countries. So that's essentially, as I said, P50. And when I present that, I say, I'm just showing history, etc. If there is anything wrong, tell me. But this is what I have looked. And by the way, I did that first by looking at YouTube on all the people that hate the oil and gas, just to get the difference between those who are hate but who have no argument and those who have actually interesting arguments against oil and gas, because I wanted really to know from the smart people that are against our industry to understand them. Okay? So this is where we are now. But next, in fact, for SPE, and this is a paradox, is that for SPE, this doesn't mean, even though, of course, our license to produce oil and gas is going to be challenged, and we don't know how, in details, and we see that it's stable, but what happens after that, we don't know. But one thing is interesting is that for SPE, it means more work, not less work. Because now, in complement to our core activities, the things that we have been doing for 150 years related to oil and gas exploration production, then we have two additional classes of activity that have been added to our to-do list in the context of energy transition. So we have the low carbon part, which includes the reduction of emission, CO2, methane, etc. We need, as all the other industries, to do our homework and reduce our own production. I'm not thinking about the product we deliver, but the emissions that we do in our process. And then, of course, we have a negative emission with CCUS. And then we have, new energy, I would say subsurface new energy. In other words, the part of the new energy where we have the skill sets to bring something to the table. And what is this? I was speaking about Darcy's law. Whenever you have Darcy's law, so whether in the deep underground, so whenever you are manipulating fluids in the deep underground, this is our territory. This is what we know how to get there. We know how to produce. We know how to model. So this is where we can bring something to the table. And this includes, of course, geothermal, but also hydrogen, critical minerals, etc. And on top of that, we have also some work to do on the reserves classification on these three different processes. So that's where we are now. So next. And so as a conclusion is again that we are indeed following the step scenario. We have these two additional classes of activity ahead of us. And of course, what is interesting is that our next generation of engineers, they will have several challenges. They will have the challenge of AI, which I'm going to speak about later. They will have the challenge of this transition. In other words, the pass or fail, it will be their work. Okay, so in 20 years or 40 years, what I tell to young professionals, if you fail, you will be forgotten. And if you succeed, you may turn out to be our most important generation, because you will be the one that are kind of transferred a traditional activity to whatever will happen, whatever cocktail you will have to deal with in a couple of decades. So we are important, but you are very important, but we have a problem with young professionals, and this is the second part of my presentation. So if you have any question on energy transition, this is the time.
I have
Yes.
a question about United States.
Yes.
Where they are in your presentation, and you know that it's the new president of the United States. He has drill baby drill. So I think that they will not use.
No, absolutely. First of all, I mean, what happens is that maybe drill is not working. The issue is the price of oil and gas. So yes, we have these things that, and honestly, it's very difficult to assess if this is a sort of accident or if it is effectively long-term process. Now, one thing that I'd like to say is that if you take, for example, SPE, then actually you get me membership. So I will answer about that. But in any case, the US is indeed a special player, and we have to live with whatever they are going to decide. And also, we see that there is no agreement. In other words, what will happen after Trump, we don't know. I do not think that essentially, but we have a fractured society that has opposites and like inconsistent view of what the future is. And basically, there's not much to that. But I agree with you that right now is I don't know where to put it. Okay? 1 year ago it was the case, but the thing is that still ultimately, I mean, the nonsense of everybody pulling some direction will have to. And so I believe that at the point, pragmatism, and again, pragmatism in all directions, not only in one direction, will have to be there. And this is what I'm seeing also, for example, because you speak about the US, but I can speak about the IEA, because the IEA, the International Energy Agency, 18 months ago, made the statement that no more exploration of oil and gas is needed to reach net zero. Okay. 3 months ago, I was invited by a former engineer who had just joined IEA to visit their headquarters in Paris. And I was thinking, the president of the Society of Petroleum Engineers, they are going not to have that with Mark, and they are going to study it. So I went in, and actually I ended up with, working in 2 hours with managers of the IEA. And we spoke about, we started the collaboration on processes, on geothermal, on CCS, on reserves, on AI, on workforce, which I'm going to speak about, on demolition, that's for the North Sea. So in other words, and that was a surprise, they now consider that they have to discuss with us because we are providing technical information that they need. So does it mean that their narrative is going to change overnight? No, and I hope not, because otherwise they will lose any credibility. But essentially, we are starting to talk. And in fact, then I'm starting to kind of say, well, for example, we net zero, net zero. When are you going to push net zero? Because I mean, net zero is important about net zero, but we see we are diverging already of 30%. So what is the point of keeping as is a scenario that we already know is not going to work? So I think they are going to do that. Also, they had another scenario that was a CPS, the current policy scenario, which is above steps, which is essentially the trajectory that we are doing. They are going to put it back in there. So in other words, even with government agencies that were very pushy, now there seems to be a sort of pragmatism that is coming back. It's good because we need to at last sit down and talk, because we know that the problem, if we are serious about climate change, we will need to solve it with engineers. I mean, NGOs, etc., they are very good at finding problems before everybody else. They are not the ones that will solve the problem. The problem will solve with scientists and engineers, and we are part of it. Not only us, of course, but we are part of it. So that's the idea. Yes.
Actually, it's maybe to continue. For me, interesting in Europe, and you mentioned that engineers will solve the problem. So we remember that almost 15 years ago, Germany decided to quit from atomic energy, just like on a political level. So purely political decisions. They don't care how they will do that. Like net zero in 2050, they don't know. So engineers must solve them. How do you think? Because you are really, we hope that you are spending a lot of time in Europe.
Yeah.
So how the Europe will look like in 10, 20 years in terms of petroleum?
Yeah, I think that is, yeah, I think currently that we are sort of, we Europeans, we are shooting ourselves in the foot because actually we are having the wrong fact. But it is starting even in Europe, you know, I mean, that's what one thing I read like a couple of weeks ago, that the French government, I don't know how it works, but kind of sent some incendiary notes to the EU to say, stop making laws that are unrealistic. So I think that the realization, I think the Germans have realized that maybe it was not a great idea. The French were about to do it. You know, the French were using the nuclear to the point where we were trashing the know-how. Okay, and the same people, I mean, the current president that did that like 10 years ago now is kind of backpedaling and getting it. So I think that again, we have this sort of common sense that may be coming back. And I had another example, and again, I'm going to be very long, but okay, when you have enough, you tell me. I had this presentation I made, you know, I put at a point I made an article that was translated into Arabic by some guy in Oman that sent that to the Sultan because in Oman there was this project of stopping oil wells. Oman stopping oil wells. Okay, fine. And so I was giving a talk at an Oman show, and then the next day I had an appointment with the government task force, which name is Exiting Oil and Gas Net Zero for Oman. I say, wow, that's going to be interesting. So I go there and I make my presentation, I adapt, of course, to Oman, etc. And so there were Omanis that were kind of starting to smile. And then there were a couple of consultants, very smart people, and actually we are in contact now, who didn't like some of the stuff. But you know, I said, like I told them, no, tell me where I'm wrong. Yeah? We are not, actually, I want to learn from you. And they told me, you know, this is a new narrative that you're showing me. You know, I mean, this narrative has been there forever, except that you didn't want to listen. And then so we went into the discussion, and I said, you know, and then this is beyond my know-how, but still I want to understand. You turn off Oman production now. What happens? Nothing. I mean, then just other countries, because they are fighting for their quota, other countries will increase their production, so no change. Except that now you will have no money to finance your energy transition. I try to understand, but you know, any country, and I showed the UAE is using the money of the oil and gas to, first of all, to reduce emissions, etc. They are doing their part, but also to finance what comes next. So why don't you do it? And apparently they say things are quieting down, and 2 days later there was a presentation to the Sultan, and apparently they say things are going to be more resolved. So to say that, yes, it's working for us, but you know, at the point, reality is just things. And again, this war has also been a wake-up call on many aspects for Europe. On, of course, the geopolitical situation, but also on energy transition and oil.
And maybe one more. It's not even a question, but oil and gas is not only energy, it's chemical industry, medicine, and maybe it's important to develop engineers that will solve this problem as energy transition and leaving some space for chemical industry, medicine, and some other things that are made from oil and gas.
Absolutely agree. And the thing is that I don't even need that in my presentation. But yes, absolutely. That's it.
Yeah.
So I agree. Actually, I deliberately bypassed it because that was looking too much then as a lobby. But yes, I mean, we have this issue of the use of heavy oil for chemicals. Okay, so let's continue on now. Next, and I'm going to speak about membership. I'm going to be faster. So this is the evolution of the SPE professional membership since 1960. Okay, and several things that I will not go back, but this was the evolution during the OPEC crisis, and this was essentially a US-led increase of the number of engineers to kind of having some production of oil and gas take over what was not being sold by OPEC countries. And then we had a peak, and I joined here. Okay, I joined the industry here, and then you have things that doesn't look that much, but corresponding to the first downturns we had in the industry. The first one was in 1985. I will speak about that a bit later. And then, in fact, in 2000 something, wow, the sky was the limit. It corresponds also of the beginning of the unconventional, so a lot of growth was coming also from the US. And then we had we reached 99,000, we never passed 100,000. And then we have a two-step going down. First, the 2015 downturn, then the pandemic. And now you see that we have kind of stability. So these numbers, okay, don't show much, except when you start to look at the detail of the demographics. The first thing is to look at the demographic by region. Next. So this is the same thing, the envelope is the same, I promise. But you see, so first of all, so this is the US, and this is non-US, because actually it's only in 2010 that we had a detail of demographics of SPE, but we would say who is where, okay? But you can see that, indeed, if you look at the number of members, now we are back to the level of 90%. It's just for this, and you will see in terms of percentage, it's even worse. So you can see, and then you can see indeed that the ones that have been growing are the Middle East, Asia Pacific a bit, Africa a bit, but you are going to see Europe. Actually, it's difficult to know where we are, but of course we are going down, etc. The Russian Caspian is going down, but with the 2020, this is complicated. Now, let us have the same thing in percentage. Next. So now we just look in percentage. So you can see that, like when I joined the industry in 1980 something, 85% of membership was US, not even North America, US. And then we are now, it's going down now to 30%. And you are going to see also Europe going down, the rest of North America going down, etc. So we see that in terms of cumulative Middle East. So we have seen this sort of transfer of power from traditional international companies that were mainly American and West Europeans to indeed the Middle East. And you can see also Asia Pacific going up, Africa going up, etc. So this is, and if I want to zoom next, it's just for illustration, because here this is what we have in the past 15 years, but we can see the transfer of power that has taken place, and also the difference of reality to the credit of SPE and to the American, because this is one thing that right now, we push back the US a bit because of Trump, etc. But everything we have from SPE is coming from them. They created the thing, but now actually it's no longer there. I mean, it's ours. Okay? But you can see indeed the transfer of power and how the center of gravity has moved to the Middle East. And this is not only about number of members. If you look at technology, if you go to Saudi Aramco, if you go to Wellnock, it's really impressive. In fact, it is the same wow effect that I had when I visited Shell in the 1980s. So that's one thing. But this is actually, the evolution of global membership. And now we are going to have a look at 2024, and then we are going to look at the age demographic. So now we are not looking at the evolution of time. We are going to look at the split. Next. So this is the evolution of it. By the way, this is SPE members. Okay, it is not active professional, because maybe if 1 year SPE is very bad at attracting professional, so there may be actually a difference between professionals and SPE members. But we believe that it is representative of actually our task force at large. So you can see indeed, okay, we have live members, okay, so essentially they are members, they don't pay any longer, so that's why they are staying here until we are informed that they have left us. But you can see the peak and the fact that the young professionals, so that are 35 and less, are indeed on the down path. And I can tell you that in 2015 it was the opposite. The maximum was with the young professional. Okay, so we are seeing this problem of struggling to get young professional. Next. And now this is the same thing with by regions. And because it is complicated here, let's go immediately and zoom in and have a percentage. So of course you can see that this percentage here corresponds to a very few number of so you should not rely too much, but you can see the catastrophe in terms of young professionals that we have in the US, where now the young professional corresponds to something like 10%. North America, Europe. So North America, so again, this is just 1 year. Okay, so sorry, I forgot to explain to you. This is a number of sorry, I should have started with that. Back to, yes, yes. This is a number of active of professional members by year of birth. So I was 1959, I was here. Sorry, I should have started with that. So this means this is why, of course, young professionals are here, and this is the people in their 40s, in their 60s, etc. Sorry for that, I should have. Next. Yeah. No. So you can see here that in terms of young professionals, the situation is catastrophic in the US, in the rest of North America, in Europe, Latin America is not great either, etc. And you can see what is going. Even the Middle East is kind of stabilizing, and that's it. And we can see that the main growth is in Southeast Asia and in Africa. And this is why, my trip of Africa was meaningful, because this is where you have maybe the demography of people engineers in 30 years. Because the horse is not dead, we can correct the shot, but this is where we are now. This is the trajectory that we are following. And this is very worrying, let's say, if you are North American or European. Next. Okay, this is, and this I'm just grouping by age, so to remove the sort of the noise, but you can see, like young professionals, we have 20% that are Americans, but if you take very young professional, less than 30, it goes even more. And you can see, of course, that people, they are between here and here. This also shows why, like if you take the SPE board, the past 10 out of the past 10 presidents, 7 have been from the US, 2 have been from Europe, and 1 has been from the Middle East. In other words, there is the underrepresentation of the other regions. But there is a reason for that, of course, that we need now to nurture these young professionals so that we can find in Africa, in South Asia, etc., the future board members, the people in this. And this is very important to work on. And so there's a positive here, but you can see the amount of work that is ahead of us and how we can be concerned on our situation. Because at the same time, we say, we are going to produce more or less the same oil and gas. We are going to have automation and AI, so probably we will be more efficient. But still, we have geothermal, there is a huge amount of work. And right now, we are attracting very few young professionals on the global scale. Next. And this gets me to the end. So maybe we can have questions here. And I don't know if I will speak about the AI or you kind of, I'm getting you too late, no? Okay. Well, yes. You have a question.
I have one question. How do you think the technology progress have influence on the members of new engineer?
Yeah, but that's my next part of the presentation. Okay. I mean, at least as an introduction.
So where in that demographic scale, you are in Europe or you are not?
I am in Europe. Yeah. No, I am not from that. Yeah, okay. I am in Europe. I mean, I think because actually the principle here is it's not your nationality. It is the country of the section of the origin. In other words, okay, if you are from the US and you are here, you are considered as a Ukraine section. Okay, so and it's European. Okay, we don't care about actually the majority of people. We care about where they're. That's it. Let's go to it. Okay, let's go to generative AI. Next. All right. So, so this is to go back in time. In 2015 was the time when AI, not Gen AI, but AI became a hot topic. You know, this is where we were able to have this system that can say this is the kind. Okay, everybody was happy. This was promising. And at this time, actually, the SPE staff was smart enough to say, maybe it's time to protect our copyrights. Because now there will be a time where, because already generative AI was starting, but it was fancy. They say, okay, so they put all these things on one Petro, on the site, etc., to say, if you load this paper, you are allowed to read it, etc., but you are not allowed to use it to train any AI. It was very smart. I've seen that. Because even now the jury is out to know what these companies like ChatGPT, OpenAI, etc., are allowed or not allowed to do. There are a certain number of high-profile lawsuits that are starting now with the New York Times that say, no, you were not allowed. We never gave you the authorization to pick our articles and train your LLM on it. So we know. So we will see how it goes. There is a first indication, like in May, the US Copyright Office has made a report on Gen AI when it tried to define what is what's called legitimate fair usage of what is available on internet. But the jury is still out. But anyway, because we made this protection, whenever somebody pretended that they had done something with created an LLM based on HP stuff, it goes back to them say, they're not allowed to do that, or then we go. And then, of course, some companies started to, major operators started to be interested into this. And so the first one to react was Saudi Aramco. And Aramco, essentially in 2023 at ATCE, we signed a memorandum of understanding where we would be developing together the first version of an energy LLM. So the principle being that SPE will provide the technical content, essentially our publications. Then Aramco will finance the thing, and then there will be, of course, a company specialized in Gen AI to do the job. And the idea would be that this energy LLM would be donated to SPE. In other words, once it's done, it's ours. Aramco, of course, who finance would have the right to use it, but it would be ours. And then we could start licensing it. So actually, we made the first technical release in January this year, and we are finalizing the validation. Okay, and the idea is that then we will start licensing it, and we have actually several other projects because we have other major companies that are interested. We are going to make an announcement next week on another large company, and we have 4 or 5 measures who are following and will do their own version of an LLM. So now, how does it work? Next. So the principle is that we take all the papers that are ours, of course, like in the one Petro, you can have SCG paper, we have LPG or papers, so it's only the papers that belong to us. We have also the books, we have also Petro Wiki, whenever there is some sort of volume of text that is interesting enough. And what we do is that we already use AI. I mean, Iterprentation, the company that does that. Those AI agents that will retrieve the paper, will read the paper, and then we turn into series of questions and answers. Because the thing is that to find you know that an LLM, generally, you ask a question and you have an answer. So the best way to train is to have questions and answers. So the idea was that out of all this material, I think they managed to get something like 40 billion questions and answers. Then there were some overlaps for their reviews. So the principle is that we get these questions and answers that constitute what we call the training data set, or TDS. And then you will use a public model. So it could be GPT, it could be Llama, it could be Gemini, etc. And essentially, the principle is that you will fine-tune this model with the question and answers of the data set to create the energy LLM at several levels of complexity, because you know, when you converge, you can have, depends on the number of parameters. So we have 8 billion parameters and a 70 billion parameter that then will be able to license. One thing I would like to say, like a philosophical remark here, it is, I find, you know, these papers, some of them are from the 1940s, 1930s. Of course, when they are older, we put a little less weight because sometimes the statement will not be updated compared to what have been found since then. But still, this means that we have publications or papers over decades. Most of them are not here any longer. And we are using what they did to create the cool, I mean, if it works, the coolest piece of technology that we are able to do. So in other words, these publications are coming from the 1950s, 60s. Now they are reused on something new, which is intellectually, I think it's good. So just to go on next. Now, of course, this would be the first version of the LLM, but of course, technology evolves, and also we are making more publications. So whenever we would have some new content, we believe that it would not be worth it, like every 3 years or something like this, that we can get together the new papers that were published. Then, but probably more relevant, whenever there is a new version of the large language model, the public large language model, then essentially we would incrementally add the new content to the old, and then we will use again the new version of the model to fine-tune and get the new version of the LLM. Yes?
Not the authors that we publish on this platform and get the royalties from.
Absolutely not. But of course, I've said that. No, but it's a very, very good question. Let me put it this way. Whenever you publish a SPE paper, there is copyright and there are patents, etc. You know, when the SLV publish or Iterprentation or Weatherford publish a SPE paper, they may have made some patents, etc. And of course, they are protected with them. But the text of the paper itself, it's a copyright, and the author transfers the copyright to SPE. And of course, we say, oh yes, but when I did that, so, like my first paper was in 1983, there was no GenAI, etc. So how could I know? We transfer the copyright. So this means at this time, so the copyright is something that is, there is no like copyright, and then the part of copyright that things that you can think about transfer the copyright. Now, the issue could be now, if a person says, I don't want the and then not publish. I know it's a force, it's a force, but we cannot not imagine after that the complexity. So we say, understand, and now we have the freedom to publish somewhere else. But when you will publish somewhere else, you will have the same problem of copyright. So, but yes, so this is a great question. Anything before the AI, it was copyright, and now in the contract we say copyright, including the use for generative.
But maybe there is a point and maybe a place of it's like indicate a point in the future contract that the authors can get royalty, and this will, like, I don't know, motivate them to publish on your platform.
But you know, but this is something that could be applicable also for the other papers. Yeah. But I mean, you see, because right now it is a usage, but when you see one paper, you know, you pay, you know, like you publish a paper, well, somebody will pay $10 or whatever to read your paper. You could say, I would like to have. Our model so far has been no. Why? Because we are not for profit. We are member-based. In other words, we say that it is part of the deal that we are using. So then when we publish, we give away the copyright, and this is not going to be in anybody's pocket. It will be in the pocket of SPE. That is not for profit. In other words, there is no money. So, but you could say otherwise. You could say otherwise. This is the option that we have taken so far. Since I live, but no, I mean, still, absolutely. And if we were for profit, that would be the first question. Right now, the acceptance is, well, this is part of our service to SPE to let the copyright. So, next. Okay, now, problem with your professionals. One thing that we want to avoid at all costs, you know, the LLM, you ask question and answer. And you know, and I've been testing this ELLM and on my subject of specialty, we're testing, etc. And you know, you ask a question, it's very, you know, it answers and it's pretty impressive. And then you start to have a kind of a question more complicated, and then it will be wrong. And then you will answer, say, oh, but don't you think that this is, and then they put, oh, yes, you're right. I mean, it is that. So the thing is that the LLM is an impressive piece of technology, but it's absolutely, there is one thing that is absolutely required, is that the user of the LLM should be able to understand when it is wrong, when it is as understood. And this gets us to our young professional and the discussion on how we, let's say, we make sure that we are going to transfer our primary knowledge to this young professional to the level where they will be the one knowing that the AI is wrong, and not kind of asking the AI and then take whatever is coming for granted. So how can you do that? Because you know, once we have the tool out, that will be very easy, you know. So what we want to do is actually to enrich, because the LLM is only answering the question, but what we want to do is a system that is called a RAG, and there will be some agentic whatever, so that whenever a question is asked, of course the LLM will prepare the answer, but you will have a contextual analysis of the question, so that essentially the system, so the different system, will have a corpus of papers. These papers will not be the full 200,000 papers, because we know that in these papers there are papers that are not so good. So this would be a subset of the papers that could be like peer-reviewed papers or papers that have a lot of reference. And essentially the system will make an optimization to say this question, for these questions, the most relevant papers are this one, and this one. So the idea would be that when the system answers, it will answer, it will not read, because the LLM is not able to know, let's say, the reason why it answers that. But then you would have to something that will say, in case of an hallucination, these are the papers that we strongly advise to read. So that would be a way to kind of reduce the risk of turning our next generation into prompt operators, because that's what we want to avoid. That you know, it will be important for the next generation to master AI, to, let's say, to use AI, etc., to make the right prompt operations, etc. But this will not be should not be at the expense of mastering primary knowledge. So when I have questions from students, I tell them, yes, of course, you want soft skills, you need soft skills. You need AI, obviously, but you need to master your primary knowledge. Otherwise, actually, you will be below the AI and not above. And that's basically the conclusion. Next. And this is just to say, yes, just to say that indeed, so we are here, we are testing, etc. So first, we need to make money. I mean, again, not for profit, but we need money. So we are going to license a big one, which is costing a fortune in terms of CPU to deploy to large companies, okay, such as ExxonMobil, Shell, etc. But we are also going this year to develop this famous RAG and agents to add the context of one Petro. And then what we are considering now is in 2027 to release the 8 billion parameters for usage to our membership at large, under conditions that we have not yet defined, because even deploying 8 billion parameter is going to be, and especially if, let's say, 10,000 people use it, for example, this is going to not cost a lot of money, so we need to know how we finance it. Whether the licensing of the big one will suffice, or if we will have maybe some sponsorship or whatever, so that we can indeed put that available to our members. Also, there will be some ongoing discussion, probably 2026, with academia, just to say, what do you want? Do you want your students to have access to that? Or in ChatGPT is good enough already. So just to know how we are going to calibrate the usage of this thing in the context of academia. Next. And that's it. I'm finished with that. So probably you are 1 hour late, right? Yes.
All right.
That's okay?
Olivier, just it's I would like to say that it's a great honor in inspiring past in Ukraine. It's like the historical event, but it's like for the first time in Ukrainian history that KARRA SPE International President came to Ukraine. Nevertheless, like taking into account the current situation in Ukraine and war, still it's a great honor for us to have it here today. And yeah, thank you very much for showing us a presentation on SPE history and ways roots. And yeah, we will try as a section and as an industry in Ukraine to create more SPE members, just to have them as our innovative engines that will bring the technologies that are available worldwide to Ukraine, and like to increase the efficiency of our industry. Yeah, I'll not be showing my presentation. Yeah, we will go to our speakers. Yeah, but we would like to also say thank you to SLB for sponsoring our event. Johan, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, and Roman, and your company SLB, thank you very much. We'd like to thank you our team. I'll not be showing our team, but it's Vyacheslav, yeah, and Mykola, yeah, and just to maybe redirect to the speakers. Yeah.
Thank you once again for delivering a highly relevant and informative presentation. Thank you. So we'll be moving further for our to the next speaker, who's going to be Dushyant Singh, data scientist from SLB. He's going to be presenting online. Please welcome.
Hello. Hello, can you hear me?
No, Dushyant, we can't hear you because for some reason the speakers are try to say something now.
Hello, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Hello.
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 Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Great.
Okay, great. Can I share my screen as well? Hello.
Yeah. You can share your presentation.
You see it now?
It's coming. Yep.
Wonderful. Let me know whenever you can see it. I think you can.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
No, there's one. Yes.
Let me try again.
Oh,
No, we see it. We see it. Yeah, we see your screen. We just try to optimize.
Okay, let me know whenever you're ready.
Oh, we're ready. Sorry.
Go ahead, we're ready.
Okay, perfect. Dobry večer. My name is Dushyant, and I'm from Schlumberger. Today, we are going to discuss and talk about a technology that is basically upgrading the game in well intervention in production domain using the data science and advanced statistical method. But before we go there, we can start with a quick introduction. My name is Dushyant Singh. I'm a production engineer and a data scientist in Schlumberger. It's been 7 years since I'm working with SLB. I completed my graduation from Indian School of Mines in India, and then I completed data science courses from IIT Madras and in France, some case studies as well as a part of graduation. And then I was started analyzing production data in SLB as a production engineer, and then I started contributing in the field of statistics and machine learning algorithms catered for production engineers specifically. And we are targeting different domains, but the one that I would like to highlight today is well intervention domain. So this is the area where reservoir engineering meets with intervention and drilling engineering, along with production engineers in the background. And the objective here is to identify well intervention candidates to improve the production in brown fields. So to achieve this objective, the data and the technology is always in the central role. So that is why you can see it is highlighted in the center, which is basically touching the planning and execution part, where we actually run the interventions in the field. But before we achieve this objective, we have to go through a detailed designing of that intervention and also selecting the candidates prior to designing those details. So that is the overall cycle, that we start from scratch with the data, and we identified well screening candidates. And then we do the detailed design of the top candidates that has the highest potential of production after running any workover program or any suitable intervention. And then we basically execute that in the field. So here, the data and technology is always in the center, and it touches all three aspects of it, but the maximum impact that it does directly is in the candidate screening part of it. Now, when we talk about data, this could be production data, this could be aerial data where you have the locations of your wells, this could be reservoir related data, your petrophysical properties, including the logs, saturation, porosity, permeability, and production information, which is water production, gas production throughout the history for different wells, and the layers, that what kind of layers are in the reservoir and what are the bottom hole coordinates for those layers. So all this reservoir and production related data can be queried using advanced statistical method. And these methods basically provide us some important analysis and insight that can help us to achieve these objectives faster. So that is the overall idea behind the technology that we will be discussing today. During this meeting, if you have any question, and you can ask as well in the middle, but if we can park it for the last part of it, that would be best. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Perfect. So let's start with the challenges. Basically, before we had this technology, what are the challenges we were facing, not as a service provider, but as an operator mainly? That there is an unrealized potential in each of the well which is producing in the field, or maybe not producing. Maybe it's a shut well, but it's been shut from quite some time, and it is in the list to activate those wells sooner. But we have so many such candidates that we don't know which one to start with. That is, we call it ideal well reactivation planning. And if the well is active, it's already producing, is it producing up to its top potential or not? So we used to have simulators for that. We used to run simulations on PipeSim and Olga. But sometimes when the field size is huge and we don't have enough resources to run those simulations, I mean, we have to rely directly on the data. That is why this is something we think that can be tackled by using machine learning and advanced statistical methods. The second part is, since sometimes the well count could be huge and running those analysis on the data in Excel sheet is also possible, but it's not practical enough because it's very slow, manual, and inefficient. When you have hundreds of the wells and every day the new production data is coming, new intervention reports are coming, any new information that comes, it's very difficult to incorporate in the existing flows as is. So that is why the overall process was very slow and manual. So we need a technology that can answer that particular challenge. And the last part is the suboptimal outcome. Sometimes we have the analysis, but we don't trace it properly. The data is not being managed properly, is not shared properly, and it takes time for sharing file from one person to another person. So that is why we need a common central place where we can host all the original raw data set, as well as the results and the analysis that machine and users are performing at the same time. So we need a technology that can basically enable that communication between and within the team with the data on the tips. So these are the main three challenges that we faced as a service provider and as an operator as well in the field. And that is why we started working on this technology. So the aim is basically to screen the suitable candidates faster, and it should be scalable within and outside the organization. So when I say within the organization, I mean you deploy the technology for one field at a time, and then you can easily scale it up across the different field. And at the same time, you can make it custom as well. So for example, if your one field is being watered out, if another field is very old and it needs some stimulation, then we can basically deploy two different versions of the same technology. One is more focused on water production issues. Another is more focused on, for example, activation or maybe improving the productivity index of the wells, stimulations and other suitable intervention types. So this kind of flexibility has to be there, and we need a system in place that can monitor all these data that is coming from the field 24/7, or maybe daily, or maybe weekly, whatever is the data frequency, it should be adaptable for that. So these are the things that we are basically trying to achieve to address the challenges. And this is where IOM comes into the picture. The technology is called as Intervention Opportunity Manager, and it's basically an AI-powered tool that analyze and rank your well intervention candidates, and it leverages surface as well as subsurface data used and the business KPI as well. For example, we have oil price forecast for next 20 years, and the price forecast changes continuously. So how can we basically incorporate the latest price forecast that is out there in the market into the system, so we can have more accurate economic analysis all the time available for each of those opportunities? So these are the kind of different workflows are available as of now. What we are trying to do here is, you can see it in how it operates. It's basically analyze the production and petrophysical data using statistical method and as well as domain equations. So we are using several domain equations in the background as well for different workflows that basically addresses different challenges. For example, we talk about liquid loading. So we have Turner coefficients there that basically try to calculate the critical speed, critical velocities, and we can basically leverage the information directly. So it's not just statistical, it's a mix of both domain and statistics. That is what I'm trying to highlight here. And where does it fit exactly? So we talked about it briefly earlier as well, that we are monitoring our field constantly using our SCADA system and alarms. Now we need to upgrade our game when it comes to opportunity screening as well, because this process is still quite manual and can take a significant amount of time to reach to the conclusion that which is the best candidate. And by the time we reach to that conclusion, we lose a lot of time. And once we have the list of those best intervention candidates, what should be the priority of those candidates is also important. For example, sometimes we deploy the crew in a batch that can basically intervene in 6 or 7 wells at the same time. And those wells, if they are nearby, then it makes more sense to deploy such crew. So those kind of planning and prioritization is also important. And this tool provides some inputs for that as well. Ultimately, we execute those opportunities in our field and we capture the real data that we are getting from those opportunities back into the system. So the machine learning model learns from the real field and the results. If, for example, one well has a potential on paper of 100 barrels gain after intervention, what happens after we actually execute the intervention? If the gain is 50 barrels, not 100, then that information has to be supplied to the machine learning model again. So model learns that this kind of intervention type is being overestimated by the system. The system has to control it down. So that is how we basically complete the loop. We collect the data from before the intervention and after the intervention, and we basically upgrade our model autonomously. And the recommendation the model can provide are several. It depends that if we want to have our own workflow, feed it into the system. If you have any idea about the data and the workflow that this data should be collected, and this is how it should be cleaned and how it should be processed, and this is how I want to see my results. If you have that mental picture in your mind, you can also add that workflow very easily into the technology. So this is how the place become a collaborative space where one engineer can develop his own workflow and share it across the team, so the whole team can use the same workflow and the same results. We do it always using Excel sheets, but we know the challenges with those sheets are what are the challenges with those sheets. That is why we need a more robust place, and that is why this technology is basically spreading from Southeast Asia to US lands. So we can dive a little bit deeper into that. But I would like to know that how much time we have left today, so that I can basically get into the necessary details. If somebody can help me to.
Normally would advise like around 15-ish minutes up to presentation. So like 5 more to go, say.
Okay, so how many minutes? Sorry, I lost it.
5.
5 more minutes. Okay, so this is how we basically achieve our objectives. If we have underperforming wells in the field, we tackle them separately. If we have some idle wells, we tackle them in a separate kind of workflow. So there are multiple types of workflows available. And we basically use machine learning and statistical methods. So this is how we do it. We have a Data IQ cloud orchestration platform, which is a third party and partnered with SLB. And this is what we are using as a tool to develop our workflows, because the orchestration is very easy, it's secure, and it could be collaborated and scalable as needed, as I mentioned earlier in the aim. So we upload the data. You can see the blue boxes are the data set that is being uploaded by users. And then we can basically clean those data set. We can like make them enriched, and we can train different machine learning methods. It could be XGBoost, random forest, or a simple logistic regression model, or maybe a more advanced, like we saw in the previous presentation, LLMs for GenAI based queries. So you can host those models here, and you can query on your data directly and get the results out there. So imagine if we have such workflow for each production domain problem, liquid loading, one workflow for production forecast, one workflow for water production problems, then you can get your results very quickly and very easily into the format that you want. And here in IOM, basically we are using business logics, production engineering domain, statistical analysis, and some automation to screen the top candidates and rank them out based on their potential. again, this is the same cycle, but because of limited time, I'm going to skip some slides and get to the main presentation part, that what is the messaging here. You can see that we collected the different production and petrophysics data we talked about, and we are using this. This example shows basically how domain and data science can come together. So you can see that this is aerial view of the well, and we are interested in the central well. So what it does, if we don't have data for this well, we basically use k-nearest neighbor algorithm to get those petrophysics property based on the reservoir lithology and petrophysics logs, that what should be the property for this particular well. And we use the method k-nearest neighbor to interpolate the results from nearby wells within the vicinity from the same reservoir zone. This is one example of imputing the data and getting more calculated inputs in our equations. We also do automated chain analysis and decline curve forecast using the system, and we collect all those results. And once we have all those results available, then we basically calculate different score for each well. So this score is basically, if your well has a very low potential, then the score is low, but if the well has a high potential, then the score is high. So this is how we calculate scores, and finally we rank the wells based on those scores. And that's the overall idea behind the IOM. This is how we do it. But the actual place where the magic happens is this particular place, where we are constantly adding new machine learning algorithms in a very systematic fashion to achieve our objective. So this is one example that how we screen candidates. We identified what's the problem. For example, if a well is underperforming, what's the reason behind it? It's a high water producer, and that it's not what we need. That's why we need to basically flag that well for water shut-off recommendation after intervention. And then we basically do the post-intervention forecast, that what should be the potential of this particular well, that once it is being intervened, how much are we expecting? And this is something that is basically, we are proud of developing that model, because the model gives very accurate post-intervention forecast using purely statistical data sets. And once you have that forecast, you can know the economics, that what's the operation expenditure to execute that intervention, what's the capex, and how much dollar value will come from that particular operation, and what will be the forecast for next 1 and 3 years. So imagine all these workflow running from left to right automatically every day, and you have all the results available in your fingertips. So this is how it helps basically to achieve our objective. Again, I'm not going to go into the different details, but this is how these are more detailed information about the workflows that we are running. Data-driven forecasting, we are running nearest neighbor analysis, we are running decline curve analysis, heterogeneity analysis for identifying stimulation and water production problem wells. We have automated the chain analysis using more than 4,000 wells and their signatures, and the ABC plot. So there are different type of plot we have basically incorporated into the system. And this is how we calculate score at the last. For each of this analysis, there's a score being computed. And at the end of the workflow run, we basically calculate the well ranking that we talked about. So this is how we can see that the wells are ranked in increasing fashion. The first to the top well is the highest priority well for intervention. The reason is because it has high remaining reserves. The green bar is highest, that says remaining reserve. Then it has a high potential post-intervention rate, and it has a good permeability, and a pay thickness is available for adding new perforations maybe. So that's why this well is a top candidate. And imagine that if the data is lying there and we can achieve this every day with the help of technology, then how much it will help our operators to reach to the conclusion faster. And that is why basically we get these results. Like these are some case studies that are done like 2 or 3 years back, that we recommended 9 wells, out of which 8 wells were intervened, and they were successfully intervened. There were mainly 4 gas wells, which produced basically 2 million scarf per day, plus 1 oil well that increased production of 300 barrels one day. This particular case study is another company that basically expanded their technology from 2 fields to 44 fields within the first 6 months of getting results. And this is another Caspian operator that basically employed this particular solution, not for offshore, but for onshore field as well, and which was successful. So there are many case studies available and papers available. So if you want to read about those, you can contact me. And we understand the value behind it, basically, that the value comes to both business and functional part of it. We basically reduce the risk of missing our opportunities in the field. We use machine learning algorithms to achieve and accelerate those analysis. And we improve our database constantly, because all the results of those analysis are being saved in the database. So you can go and audit it anytime, and everything is available at one place. So this is how basically it helps, and it can be scaled across the enterprises. It's open and available for every user. So these kind of basic things that we inherit from using advanced machine learning technology here. That's all from my side. Sorry for rushing it in the second half, but if you need more information, you can contact me. Yeah, my email address is there. Thank you.
Dushyant, thank you a lot. Does anyone have any questions for the information that has been presented? Yep.
But I mean, give priority to the section.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah. Yeah, Olivier Houzé, SPE. Just one thing, all the components that you are presenting are kind of data-driven. And okay, I understand that what you want is essentially to get to the right, to point to the candidate wells and to point to the right decision and right intervention. But of course, you have potentially much more under the hood with the models. Do you have anything on your to-do list for the future to then connect that to basically physical models so that you can get, in fact, more quantitative? Because of course, you have also for each well, the models that are active, your Olga or well test or whatever. So do you have the plan to get to this next step, or this may be kind of beyond the perimeter of what you can do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to answer that, yes, we already integrated the pipe sim models as of today in the analysis. So whenever we select the best candidates, for example, you have 200 wells in the field, and you select top 10 candidates. So once that selection is done, pipe sim models are being automatically integrated into the system for those 10 wells that can basically run some, I would say, sensitivity analysis that support the statistical results. So we basically merge both the simulated results and statistical results to make the final detailed design.
Yeah, just a follow-up question. When you get this pipe sim level, that will be taken over by the engineer, or do you have integrate that into your automation system?
It is integrated into the automation system. The latest updated model provided by the engineer is integrated into the system. So it's not that that machine is working independently. Of course, that the human role is there. They can always replace those models, tune those models as required. But if the model is giving accurate results, then it is automatically integrated.
Thank you very much for the answer. Any questions so far? No? Okay, Dushyant, thank you once again.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And for the second speaker, I would like to invite Roman Petrokushyn. Welcome.
I can rent it.
Yeah. $60 per hour.
Yeah, exactly. You can get it 3.5 meters, so you can get.
That's strange. think we'll have to ask the fund to
Yeah.
give us the share.
Sean, could you please get me back as a presenter, please? You're still here.
But it's not showing it on.
Yeah,
Can
let
you
me
just-
try. Can you
Yeah.
please help me to do that? I never done it before. Let me try.
3 dots on the Central Ukraine Section screen, and then make as a presenter.
Or
Okay.
make a host.
Or make a post.
Can we just click share? No?
Yeah, I think that's better. Let me click share. Can you see it now?
Okay.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
So stop share. Yeah.
I don't see host options here. Let me check here.
Can you try to show now? Because maybe sometimes it's
You can see us.
Okay, now I can see host options here. Yeah. Can you see it now? My screen, like the host options. I opened the host options, but I think you cannot see it now.
Well, we can see your screen, but apparently you have 2 screens, so we can not see this.
the presentation is on his computer.
No, the presentation is already.
Okay, so he has to stop sharing.
Yeah, but he has the host.
Ah,
Cannot share because he is the host.
So if you go to participants and then hit 3 dots.
Let
And
me
then
go
you
to
can-
participants. So what name should I make the host?
Central Ukraine Section.
Okay, Central Ukraine. Okay, I found the option. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Доброго дня, колеги. Я думаю, що я буду проводити свою презентацію українською, чи вашу, якщо ви хочете. Дуже сильно можемо перейти на англійську. But if you'll excuse me, I'll do it in Ukrainian.
so I cannot ask questions.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now all the slides are in
Nice,
English.
nice.
All the slides are in English, if you need.
I'm good.
Yes. Дуже дякую, що ви тут. Дуже дякую, що ви досиділи так довго. Я впевнений, що ніч сьогодні була тяжка. І хочеться всім спати. Тому я сподіваюся, я попробую зробити її швидкою, попробую зробити її цікавою і не сильно здаватися в супертехнічні деталі. Навіть якщо ви не працювали з Seismic, то постараюся так зробити, щоб вам також було цікаво. Слайд, будь ласка. Мене забув представитися. Мене звати Petrokushyn. З тим, ким ми не знайомі, я працюю в компанії SLB, колись ми називалися ще БЖ, тепер ми вже SLB. Геофізиком, вже іде 7-й рік. Займаюся в основному сейсмічною інтерпретацією. Сьогодні я хочу вам розказати про застосування штучного інтелекту або застосування машинного навчання в сейсмічній інтерпретації. Такі ознайомчі слайди, що це не секрет, що машинне навчання повсюду розвивається. Ми сьогодні бачили на слайдах. Це останні за півроку останні новини, які я витягнув. Тобто так, і ідентифікація там раку, створення автоматизованих машин, які будуть працювати в Uber. Тобто машинне навчання збільшує свій обсяг всіх процесів. Моя задача сьогодні, крім того, що я покажу застосування машинного навчання в сейсмічній інтерпретації, я хочу забрати таку стигму сенсу, бо дуже часто виходить так, чи ж машинне навчання забирає нашу роботу як сейсмічних інтерпретаторів, чи геологів, які моделюють. Чи навпаки, ми можемо використовувати машинне навчання, і це дасть нам якийсь суперсилу або суперскіл в резюме. Я залишу це питання на ваше вирішення.
зроблю технічні слайди, і потім ми поговоримо. Я дам своє враження, можливо, у вас вони трішки буде відрізнятися. Зазвичай, коли даю будь-яку презентацію, даю 3 питання: what, why and how. Тобто, що я розказую, навіщо я це розказую, і про що ми саме будемо говорити, чому. Машинне навчання, не буду вдаватися в супердеталі, але машинне навчання – це частина штучного інтелекту, який працює на основі input дати або вихідних даних, яких ми контролюємо, які ми робимо кращими. І ми маємо їх 2 типи. Бачите, unsupervised і supervised. Всій сьогоднішній презентації я сьогодні буду розказувати про різні типи. Тобто це будуть як і unsupervised, ті, які ми не контролюємо, де ми все віддаємо машині, і машина робить все за нас, робить кластерування даних. Або supervised, де ми навчаємо машину, ми даємо якийсь невеликий набір даних, навчаємо машину, і тоді отримуємо результат. Або класифікацію, або регресію. Навіщо ми це робимо? І тут вже буду трішки даватися більше деталі до сейсмічної інтерпретації. Я працював з машинним навчанням для сейсмічної інтерпретації на 4 проєктах, і скажу з свого досвіду, найбільший плюс – це саме перше – reducing cycle time. Тобто, якщо ви зазвичай на те, щоб інтерпретувати горизонти розломи, іде в нас місяці, деколи 4-6 тижнів, в залежності від розміру куба, то з використанням цих інструментів це дає зберегти час до днів, деколи, можливо, тижнів. De-risking. Ми маємо можливість аналізувати різні сценарії. Тобто, з допомогою машинного навчання нам не потрібно сидіти місяць, будувати один концепт. Ми можемо створити багато різних концептів, які будуть працювати в нас для підходу, а що, якщо наша геологія не так, як ми це бачимо. Зазвичай, якщо я як сейсмік буду робити інтерпретацію, то в мене є одна думка. І коли я презентую свій проект, сейсмік, який приймає цей проект, він буде мати іншу думку. З машинним навчанням ви можете зробити декілька сценаріїв, як один геофізик з різними напрямками. І increase productivity – це щоб з різними методами, ці різні сценарії, які ви протестували, ви можете подивитися, чи впевнений я в цьому сценарії, чи не впевнений я в ньому, і паралельно їх проганяти, збільшуючи продуктивність вашого часу. Машинне навчання і все, що я зараз буду показувати, це все буде вже те, що в нас є вбудовано в Petrel, все, що є, в принципі, в SLB. Машинне навчання в GNG, Geology and Geophysics, є доволі поширеним. Сьогодні я буду говорити про цю частину Machine Learning Assisted Seismic Interpretation, або ASI. Будемо говорити про кожен з кроків, яких є. Але що я хочу сказати, що це не вся частина машинного навчання, яка є в Petrel. Тобто в нас є машинне навчання для property моделінгу, для оцифровки картежів, величезний скоп, величезні цілі для кількісної інтерпретації. І в цьому місяці в Тулуз на EEG було анонсовано партнерство між Seagull і Petrel, і SLB, де тепер буде Python Tool Pro, де ви можете використовувати Python скрипти всередині Petrel. Отже, повертаючись до сейсмічної інтерпретації, далі, ми будемо працювати, я буду сьогодні розказувати про такі 4 основних елементи. По-перше, це вилучення і інтерпретація розломів. Ми завжди починаємо з інтерпретації розломів, коли ми маємо куб. Я розкажу 2 методи, які вони в нас є, також, по суті, unsupervised і supervised. Далі поговоримо про горизонти, також є 2 методи, про них поговоримо. І те, що я сказав, de-risking або аналіз сценаріїв, це subsurface reservoir characterization. Тобто ці всі моменти, всі, які були створені в Petrel, вже є в наявності до 25-го року. В квітні в нас ще появився Seismic Conditioning, буквально дуже новий тул, також його використовував, покажу, до речі, на українських даних, що, думаю, може бути цікаво. Отже, що стосується машинного навчання для вилучення розломів і для вилучення розломів. У нас є 2 методи. У нас є user-trained і pre-trained. Можна на них дивитися як unsupervised і supervised. Що означає між user-trained і pre-trained? По суті, pre-trained – це black box, це чорна коробка, де все, що вам потрібно закинути, це потрібно закинути ваш сейсмічний куб, і машина дасть, і Petrel вам дасть результат куба розлому. User-trained – це там, де ви контролюєте, які розломи ви хочете бачити. Для цього потрібно проінтерпретувати до 1% даних, я покажу там на окремих слайдах є, і машина вам дасть вилучення розломів по всьому вашому кубу, в залежності логіки, які ви хочете її послідовувати. Якщо ми говоримо про pre-train, то бачите, не знаю, чи дозволяє якість подивитися, але віконечко в нас є лише одне, де наш інпут лише один – це сейсмічний куб. Тобто ви закидаєте ваш сейсмічний куб, цей алгоритм він був навчений нашими геофізиками на різних датасетах світу, відкритих датасетах. Тобто алгоритм вже знає, як на основі сейсміки, як виглядають розломи на основі сейсміки. Тобто ви сюди закидаєте ваш куб, нажимаєте клавішу, йдете на ланч, і через там декілька хвилин або декілька годин, залежно від розміру куба і вашої машини, ви отримуєте куб розломів, з якими ми потім можемо працювати, вилучати розломи, які нас цікавлять. Коли ми говоримо про User-Trained Fault Prediction, User-Trained Fault Prediction – це той метод машинного навчання, який ми називаємо Supervised, який ми контролюємо. В сенсі якому ми маємо наш сейсмічний куб, ми навчаємо машину, ми робимо тренінг-лейбли, тобто ми даємо інтерпретацію куба 1% даних. Ну, щоб зрозуміти, якщо у вас є 500 інлайнів, 500 крослайнів, достатньо 10 ліній для інтерпретації. Ви задаєте ці тренінг-лейбл сюди, закидаєте ваш куб і получаєте куб розломів. Це демо, яке я записав з датасету Австралії, там можна його проглядати. Я тут прогнав два методи. Перший – це user-train, другий – це pre-train. Ви зразу бачите, не знаю, чи дозволяє якість проектора побачити, але розломів тут дуже багато, на таймслайсі повинно бути бачити. Ось ці шрами, які у нас тягнуться по кубу. Тут близько 200 таких основних розломів, плюс є майнер. Лейбли, які я зробив 4 лінії по інлайнам, 4 лінії по крослайнам. Всього тут 400 інлайнів, 400 крослайнів, тобто 800 ліній, тобто 1% даних. І прогнавши цей результат, у мене є fault cube. Це зараз вам показує user trained на основі тих лейблів, які я зробив. І зараз я зроблю зум-ін на зону інтересу і покажу вам різницю між pre-trained і user-trained. Тобто я прогнав два алгоритми. По суті, можете дивитися на це, як два геофізики зробили інтерпретацію. Один, який машина вже була навчена на різних датасетах, інший, який навчив я. Тобто це в мене зараз user-trained, оце в мене pre-trained. Що ми бачимо? В основному сама логіка розломів прослідковується. Основні розломи присутні на місці. Але якщо прийдеш на наступний слайд. Наступний. Так, дякую. Ось тут зробив скріншот між user-trained і pre-trained. User-trained він буде йти по тій логіці, які ви вчите. Тобто, якщо ви хочете вилучити, наприклад, лише тектоніку розломів, які мають характеру gross fault, або розломів скиду, підкиду, якщо є зсувні розломи, ви можете вибрати інтерпретацію лише їх, і машина буде ігнорувати будь-які інші розломи, яких ви не хочете інтерпретувати. Ось, наприклад, ось тут я спеціально не зробив розлом, я його проігнорував. Машина його побачила, вона побачила це як зону розломів і додавала їх. Тобто, це знову ж таки до чого мене веде? Це доведе до аналізу різних сценаріїв. Тобто, на цей час, на це мені прийшло user-trained приблизно години-дві, pre-trained це було 30 хвилин. Ну, це було з моєю машиною, це залежить також від машини і куба. Це що стосується розломів. Що стосується горизонтів, також є два методи. Перший метод – це single horizon, другий – це multi-horizon. Multi-horizon появився в кінці минулого року, в листопаді минулого року. Single horizon появився з 2020 року. Працює він на нейронних мережах, також як і попередні методи, я забув сказати, це також нейронні мережі, CNN. Цей працює на комбінації нейронних мереж і radial basis function. Якщо ми... Ще раз? Так. Сюди ми можемо закинути як і куб розломів, так і наш лейбли. Лейбли також до 1% даних. І ось тут я показую порівняння. Ліворуч в мене є автотрекінг, тобто той звичайний метод інтерполяції-екстраполяції, який ми використовуємо в Петрелі, і праворуч це машинне навчання single horizon. Цей метод зайняв мене буквально 2 хвилини на те, щоб прогнати і поставити лейбли, хвилин 15 пішло. З автотрекінгом, ви знаєте, якщо мало даних йому годувати, інтерполяція-екстраполяція буде тяжчою. Також, якщо в нас є там такі два івенти, які сходяться, ми знаємо, що автотрекер дуже часто до cycle-skipping. Ці методи, ми знаємо їхні обмеження. Тобто, машинне навчання тут не заміняє те, що в нас є. Машинне навчання доповнює і можливо показати якісь додаткові можливості, які автотрекер нам не дозволяє. Особливо, коли ми говоримо про зону, де в нас немає ніякої інтерпретації, бачите, що, як зазвичай, інтерполяція-екстраполяція будуть цю зону ігнорувати. І зону високих розломів. Тобто, якщо в нас дуже сильна розломна тектоніка, ми не можемо зробити інтерпретацію кожного розломного блоку, як саме буде виглядати ці рефлектори. Наступний. І Multi-Horizon. Multi-Horizon у нас з'явився в листопаді 24-го року. Коли Single Horizon ми використовуємо для згідних горизонтів, згідно залягаючих горизонтів, тобто тих, яких немає складної геології. Multi-Horizon був створений для складної геології. Тобто, якщо у вас є каньйони, руслові тіла, карбонати, якщо у вас є виклинювання, будь-яка складна геологія, тобто у вас немає подовженості горизонта, ви будете використовувати Multi-Horizon. Він працює на доволі новому алгоритмі Virtual Architecture Transformer, який сприймає сейсміку не як рефлектор, не як нейронна мережа, а сприймає його як пікселізація. Тобто, в залежності від того, на якій амплітуді фазі ви зробили ваш пікінг, ваші ці 1% даних, Петрель буде сприймати сейсміку як пікселі і продовжувати цю інтерпретацію в тривимірному просторі. Наступний слайд. Ось кейс, як можна використовувати його. Ось тут у нас є сейсміка, тут у нас є русло річки. Слайди, на жаль, не показують деталі, але в нас тут є русло річки, яке пересікає рефлектори, в нас тут є поверхня ерозії, в нас тут є даунлеп, в нас є ось цей сигмоїд, який в нас є вздовж русла річки. Тобто це все, цю суперскладну геологію, яку вручну інтерпретувати займає місяці, ви можете прослідкувати на основних ключових лініях, знову ж таки, з різними етапами ітерації, але достатньо 1% даних для того, щоб це вилучити. І ви можете прогнати два кейси, наприклад, в залежності від того, як саме ви будете інтерпретувати. Тобто, якщо ви будете інтерпретувати, що ваша поверхня, ось тут це є ерозійна, нижня у вас є горизонт, який викладається. Тобто це буде кейс 1. Кейс другий, де ви приймаєте випадок, що в нас, наприклад, є заглиблення басейну, і зелений горизонт у нас є поздовжний, протягнутий, а чорний горизонт, він має заповнює цей басейн, тобто він зупиняється. В залежності від якого кейсу ви проглядаєте, така і буде інтерпретація. Тобто тут також ще потрібно включати геологічне ваше розуміння. І наступний слайд. Ось, наприклад, як я би підійшов до інтерпретації. Так? Тобто я зробив інтерпретацію русла ріки, русла оцих даунлеп, тобто непродовжуваних горизонтів через те, як у нас було посадка накопичення, десь де в нас є збільшення потужності, десь де в нас є зменшення потужності на ключових лініях. І потім, далі, слайд, ми це протягуємо на тривимірний простір. Тобто ми задаємо трьома ітераціями, у нас є QC model, Low Resolution і Full Resolution. Я відразу покажу Full Resolution, де в нас є вилучення усіх горизонтів, сейсміки як зон. Тобто ви бачите, ось тут у нас є русло річки, у нас є горизонти, які мають такий пилоподібний характер, тобто десь у нас відбувалася поверхня ерозії. Ви бачите, що в якихось зонах у нас є збільшення потужності, у нас є зменшення потужності. І зараз ми будемо знімати ось цю сейсміку, ось цю інтерпретацію зона за зону. Цей інструмент, він є доволі новий. Я його, використовував на 3 проєктах, які в мене були, і він доволі гарно себе показує в складній геології. Тобто ви бачите, у нас зараз тут буде русло річки, яке пересікає два горизонти, яке можна вилучити або як сейсмічний горизонт, або як, наприклад, Geophysicist для подальшої інтерпретації, подальшого включення планування. Наступний. Так, ще раз. І до чого я це веду? Тобто у нас є ці методи інтерпретації розломів, у нас є методи інтерпретації горизонтів. Ми пам'ятаємо в голові, що в нас є, я говорив про de-risking. Далі. Наша задача – це створити різні сценарії, що якщо у нас буде такий розлом, такий горизонт, це ми можемо зробити, тестуючи різні моделі. В суті, зараз буду показувати два сценарії, де в мене один метод розломів user-trained, інший fault-trained, і на цей горизонт вилучення атрибута root mean square. Тобто десь ви бачите підвищення амплітуд і наскільки воно співпадає з розломом, з самою тектонікою, наскільки воно спілкується. Тобто це вже, по суті, де геофізика переходить в геологічне моделювання і, можливо, навіть до динамічного моделювання, де вже є розуміння, як ми інтерпретуємо структуру, тому що чим складніша геологія, тим більше інтерпретацію ми можемо дати. Так, ще раз. Вступимо. Так. Але тут питання. Тобто я це все вам показав для прекрасної 3D-сейсміки. Питання, що якщо у мене є 2D-сейсміка і в мене є погана якість. Тобто у нас є полстек дані, цей весь machine learning для нас не цікаво. В квітні додавалося новий новий функціонал, нова функція, яка називається ML Seismic Conditioning. Цей алгоритм був побудований для того, щоб вилучати шум з постсигналу. Тобто, якщо у вас є 3D-сейсміка, 2D-сейсміка вже оброблена, у вас немає оригінальних даних, ви можете використати цей алгоритм для того, щоб вилучити шуми. Він був навчений таким чином, там було 1200 ліній, які були тестовими, де машина вчилася, де машину навчали вилучати саме шуми і вилучати multiples. Можна собі слайд. Я зробив демо, це демо з моєї наукової роботи з Прикарпатського проєкту, сейсміку мені дав мій науковий керівник. І ось бачите, 2D-сейсміка, ось візуалізація, але ми можемо додати нашу сейсміку. Ми можемо вибрати тут denoising harshness, тобто наскільки сильно ми будемо видаляти ці шуми, і вибрати різні параметри. Тобто наскільки сильно буде параметр denoising. І зараз я буду включати спочатку 0,25, тобто з кроком по 25. Тобто 1, 2, 3 і 4. І може здатися, що ніби не так сильно стало краще, але якщо я зараз зроблю зум зону інтересу, і зараз поверну на те, що у нас було спочатку, ви зрозумієте, що насправді було буде гірше. Зараз поверну ще раз на denoising. Тобто для чого це все створено? Це створено для того, щоб це не для складних маніпуляцій, як, наприклад, кількісної інтерпретації, це не для інверсії, це для того, щоб покращити ось цю продовжуваність. Тому що якщо б я дивився на оригінальну сейсміку, навряд чи я побачив, де там в мене є виклинювання, десь в мене є ось там плита, де в мене буде виклинювання горизонтів. Тобто цей алгоритм є, він працює доволі просто, там одна функція, яка працює на denoising. Так, можна наступний. І дуже часте питання, дуже часто мені, як геофізику компанії, що запитують, що чекає, коли вже в нас буде RGT, коли буде інтерпретація кожного рефлектора, який ми вже дуже добре знаємо, і це питання в нас є. Можна собі слайд. Relative Geological Time, або інтерпретація кожного рефлектора, як ви бачите ось тут на GIF, буде дуже скоро. За обіцянками, це буде до кінця цього року. Я зареєстрований на внутрішнє тестування, яке буде проведене в цьому році. Яка його логіка? Також він буде працювати на тому методі, що у вас є ваш сейсмічний куб, і ви можете вилучити будь-який рефлектор або будь-який відбування горизонту, який вас інтересує. Або попередньо навчивши, попередньо давши зону, або взявши оригінальний куб і просто витягнувши з нього будь-який рефлектор. Тобто це те, що нас чекає, і якщо те, що я вам вже показав, що вже є в Петрелі, це один горизонт або зональна інтерпретація, multi-horizon Seismic Iterprentation, це буде щось нове, що дозволить вам не лише зона інтересу, не лише ваші горизонти інтересу, а всі рефлектори, які ви бачите між ними. Наступний. Тобто, якщо підбити підсумки, думаю, ми вклалися в час. Машинне навчання в нас вже є в GNG, так? В нас вже є в геофізиці. Що в нас вже є в сейсміці, і це доступно не лише на хмарному середовищі, це вже доступно на наших машинах on-prem. Це вилучення горизонтів, вилучення розломів різними методами. Одних горизонтів зональної сейсміки, або що стосується розломів, user-trained або pre-trained, тобто те, що вже навчено геофізиками SLB або вашою інтерпретацією. Seismic conditioning, тобто якщо у вас є постек дані, і ви хочете покращити вашу сейсміку, покращити цю продовжуваність рефлекторів. І сподіваємося, що на наступній презентації, яку ми будемо вам давати, це вже буде про RGT-куби. Наступний слайд. Фінальне заключення від мене. Ми розпочали Спайдермена і ним закінчимо. Я би сказав, що не треба боятися машинного навчання, і це не щось, що забере нашу роботу. Але я, як геофізик, я бачу в ньому потенціал в тому, що це покращить мою роботу, пришвидшить її процес і може помножити мене як геофізика на декілька ітерацій. Тобто я зможу прогнати мою інтерпретацію з різними підходами, з різним кутом, дивлячись на сейсміку, і вибираючи робити цей сейсмік дерізки. В принципі, я так і роблю свою наукову роботу. Все, в мене все. Дуже дякую вам за увагу.
Дуже дякую. Якщо є в когось запитання, будь ласка. звати як?
Богдан чи кажи, ви, як скажете.
Підкажіть, які характеристики вашої машини?
Ну, у мене машина SLB, вона побудована для таких задач. Мінімальна вимога для цього це буде 24 ГБ GPU. І графічна карта A500 NVIDIA. Тобто 24 ГБ GPU це мінімум, який повинен бути. У мене 128, але кажу, це типу, ідеал. 24 достатньо.
RGT це буде як окремий модуль, чи він буде якось інкорпорований в модулі взагалі машини?
Наскільки я знаю, це повинно бути все в машинній learning. Тобто це буде однією ліцензією. Всі ось ці інструменти, які я показав, вони будуть, по суті, поділені на підліцензії, тобто fault extraction, fault prediction, horizon extraction, але вони повинні йти як однією ліцензією, де машин навчання. Тут у нас ще є, я не показував, але там є waveform classification, є ще Seismic. Тобто з квітня це вже додано до ліцензії. Тобто ви купуєте, отримуєте одну ліцензію, це все один.
Не знаю, датабейс, на основі якого відбувається екстракшн, він, виходить, як викачується, чи потрібна постійна комунікація з серверами, що держать для того, щоб...
Ні, це все, всі алгоритми, вони є, всі скрипти, вони прописані в Петрелі, вони всі базові. Тобто немає ніякої комунікації, ніякі дані ви не передаєте в SLB, ви отримуєте ліцензію, всі скрипти всередині цього і всі алгоритми, які працюють з даними всередині компанії у вас. Тобто немає ніякої комунікації з серверами. Це є, якщо ви працюєте з Cloud, якщо ви працюєте, наприклад, з OSDU, але якщо ви працюєте on-prem, все на вашій машині, можете відключитися від інтернету і все буде працювати.
Супер, дякую.
Дякую за питання. Все? Я думаю, що ми і так замучили вас.
Дуже дякую. Якщо колег онлайн також запитань немає, значить немає. Хочу всім подякувати за ваш час і також спонукати вас, у вас на столах лежать папірці з QR-кодами, можете долучитися до підтримки Збройних сил України, а також колег і членів СПІ, які служать в лавах Збройних сил України. Тому не соромтеся, будь ласка, можете це зробити навіть прямо зараз. На сьогодні все. Ми зараз продовжуємо тоді наш нетворкінг уже в більш неформальному форматі за кавою, чаєм і снеком. Всім дуже дякую.